Welcome, everybody, to USC Trojans Primetime Live here at the Voice of College Football, the USC channel. Like the channel, subscribe, share with your friends, get notification reminders, the whole bit. Also support all the other team shows in the Voice of College Football Network. Mark Rogers with The College Football Show, Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. And this is the week before Big Ten Media Days, so we're going to spend a good chunk of the first half of the show talking about that. Matt Zemek here with Ethan Inman. But before we do get into our Big Ten Media Days preview, Ethan picked up something on the internet Thursday afternoon, so just a few hours before the show. Ethan, tell everybody what the story was about and your initial reaction to it.
Sure. So I'll share my screen with everybody. I have the story pulled up that I saw. I think it was kind of circulating a little bit on a couple of different sites the past few days, but the one that I saw was today because it was from a USC specific outlet. And it's talking about Brock Purdy and Matt Campbell and the USC job. So basically the lowdown on this is Brock Purdy went on a very famous, very well-known podcast like last week, I believe. It's called the Bussin' with the Boys podcast. Former NFLers Taylor Lewan and Will Compton are the hosts. It's actually wildly entertaining. I'd recommend. It's really fun. Not to send you to a podcast outside of the VOCFB network because we obviously have the best, but it's in terms of competitors, it's a close second, I would say. But so really entertaining podcast. They have Brock Purdy on because he's, I think the show's based in Tennessee. He works out in Nashville now because that's where he lives in the off season. And, there was some big stories that came out of that, but there was this one story that kind of went under the radar, which was Brock talking about his last year at Iowa State and just kind of one of the last conversations he had with Matt Campbell. And he basically revealed that Matt Campbell had an offer on the table from USC before they hired Lincoln Riley. And it was obviously a lot of money because it made Matt Campbell, really seriously consider leaving Iowa State. So probably somewhere in the Lincoln Riley range. I wouldn't guess that it was the same number as Lincoln Riley because you have to really, impress Lincoln Riley to get him to leave the situation he was in at Oklahoma. So I'd assume a little bit less, but, still in the ballpark, it seems like from what Brock was saying. And I'll just read some of the quotes from the stories. They're pretty interesting. Here Brock says, my senior year, I was leaving. I was out the door, met with him after my senior night, and he was crying pretty hard. You could tell there was something going on. He was going to leave, that kind of thing. Met with him the next day, and I think USC offered him something legit before Lincoln Riley. When they offered him some stuff, he was deciding on whether to go. He's from Ohio. He's a Midwest guy. I actually brought my dad with me the next day when I met with him, and we talked. I was like, dude, my dad was in my life. He coached me up. He was talking about out in LA, it's just a different world compared to the Midwest where he's used to and being in his kid's life and stuff. Would just be a different kind of environment, not knocking USC, California, anything. It's just different. And then Brock kind of reveals that after that whole conversation, Matt Campbell was kind of more sure that he was going to stay at Iowa State. And then, he said, I'm not saying that I was the determining factor in that, but I think I just gave him a little perspective on being a father, what matters, raising your kids. He could do that at Iowa State. So super interesting story, a couple of different thread lines to go on here. I mean, the whole raising your kids, whether it's comfortable for a coach to play in LA, that's definitely one. But then, of course, I think the program would look a whole lot different if we had Matt Campbell as our head coach. So take any of those trains of thought that you want, Matt. But I think there's a lot to unpack here for sure.
Man, where do we start? First off, there's that advertisement on the show on the screen grab. I don't know if anybody else recognizes that person. That's Steve McQueen. Really famous movie star, like a giant movie star. There he is, back. His face, it kind of pops up and then disappears briefly. Steve McQueen was, as big as it gets for movie stars in the late 1960s, car chases, movie Bullet. I bring it up because, Steve McQueen is Hollywood glamour. He is, L.A., Southern California royalty, purely in terms of the entertainment industry. So we're reading this story about this Matt Campbell wholesome Midwest slant and how California is different. So couldn't help but noticing that. But the other thing is, where does Brock Purdy play NFL football? The California coast. The exact difference from so different from the Midwest, and he's thriving there, of course. He led the 49ers to a Super Bowl. So just so many, like just the backstories, first of all, before we get into the actual discussion about USC, kind of hilarious there. So Ethan, I think really, in terms of the juicy elements of this story, and of course it's juicy to a certain obvious extent just because you have Brock Purdy talking about how, hey, Matt Campbell was emotional and USC offered him something legit. And of course, as we remember, as we go back to 2021, Thanksgiving weekend, like I remember on Thanksgiving Friday, John Wilner was saying, and like he wasn't inaccurate, I don't think, that like stuff was happening. I remember John Wilner like this is getting intense. The courtship between USC and Matt Campbell. It didn't mean anything was done, but that things were heating up. And so Iowa State played a game on Thanksgiving Friday afternoon. And if we just stop for a moment and consider why that's significant, it's just that Iowa State's regular season was going to end on Friday afternoon before Saturday. So USC would have been able to then step in, presumably, and interview Matt Campbell, initiate that process to bring him aboard. And let's remember, when Lincoln Riley's Oklahoma team in 2021 lost to Oklahoma State on Saturday night, so one day later, one day after Iowa State and Matt Campbell played their regular season finale, because Lincoln Riley's Oklahoma team with Caleb Williams lost, Oklahoma did not make that season's Big 12 championship game. It was Oklahoma State against Dave Aranda and Baylor for the championship game. So because, this is a well-documented part of the Lincoln Riley hire at USC, because Oklahoma did not qualify for the Big 12 championship game, that meant OU's regular season was over, and Mike Bohn and Brandon Sosna were able to then, court him through the night into the morning. And Brandon Sosna, has said, like, we were praying for Oklahoma State to win that game, so that Oklahoma would not make the Big 12 title game, and that would free up Lincoln Riley on the open market that much earlier. So all of those details with Iowa State playing Friday, that gave Matt Campbell a leg up on Lincoln Riley, if we presume that like those were the top two candidates on USC's big board. Matt Campbell's season ended Friday. We didn't know for sure if Oklahoma's season was going to end a day later on Saturday. It did, but it's just fascinating to go through all the minute details of that Thanksgiving weekend from 2021. Ethan, my first question for you would be, and it's obviously something that USC fans would be interested in, but if let's just go through the hypothetical that Matt Campbell does take the USC job, would USC be better off right now compared to what we've seen under Lincoln Riley? And obviously there are a lot of what ifs to consider, a lot of hoops to jump through. One is just, how would the rest of that 2021 coaching carousel have played out differently if Matt Campbell goes to USC? Like, where would Lincoln Riley have gone? Would he have stayed at Oklahoma? Would he have gone to LSU? And if he goes to LSU, does Brian Kelly stay at Notre Dame? Like all those dominoes. But, we've also seen coaching careers unfold in the 4 years since then. And it's a really interesting thought exercise. We're not here to condemn anybody, but in terms of, just which programs actually would have been better off if A had happened instead of B. So let's apply that to USC. Would USC be better off, in your estimation, if Matt Campbell and not Lincoln Riley got the job?
Oh, it's a really interesting question. I think, first of all, and I think everyone's going to agree with me on this, if Matt Campbell gets hired, 2022 just doesn't happen. Like that season as constructed, there's just no way anything remotely close to that happens. Like if you hire Matt Campbell and the quick roster turnover just doesn't happen, you're just hoping to be above 500 that season, I think, and that would have been considered I mean, USC fans are never satisfied with anything other than competing for at least a conference championship. But I think, in a hindsight is 2020 type of thing, first season under Matt Campbell, just, going 7-5 or 8-5 with the bowl win or something like that would have been a rousing success. I think there's an argument that a season like last season may have been a little bit better. And, maybe we have more of an upward trajectory than like a great first season, and then we regress for 2 seasons, and then now it seems to be on the upswing again. I mean, obviously, if Matt Campbell is the head coach, you're not going to have Alex Grinch as the defensive coordinator, so maybe the defense isn't set back as much like it was those first couple of years. I mean, if you look directly at what Matt Campbell's done the past few years at Iowa State, I mean, there's a compelling argument that USC would be in a decent place when it comes to like Iowa State was basically in the position last year that USC was in 2022, which is, in the title game and one blowout away from making the college football playoff. I mean, it's a different world nowadays, obviously, with 12 teams being able to make the playoff, and Iowa State had a lot easier path to the playoff than USC did in 2022. But it is like effectively the same situation. They were, heading into that day before they knew that they were going to get blown out by, over 20 points. They were a win away from the college football playoff. And there was, times during the season where I think they were ranked as high as 7 or 9 in the AP poll, I remember. And like there were times in the season where people thought they would be the Big 12 representative. It was BYU for a while, it was them for a while, and then ultimately Arizona State just kind of came out of nowhere and snatched it up at the end. So with considering that, there's been somewhat of an upward trajectory. I mean, Rocco Becht is a great quarterback. Maybe you would assume that Matt Campbell still gets Rocco Becht to come out to LA just because USC has all the resources. Plus, the relationship with Matt Campbell would still kind of endure. Rocco Becht is a pretty good quarterback. Is he better than Jaden Maiava this year? I'm not sure. I mean, Jaden Maiava is really raw and promising. I think Rocco Becht is a safer pick to be better this year, but I think Maiava could be better. So I don't know. I think the 3 years would have been similar. I don't know if they play out in the same order. I think we, at some point under Matt Campbell, would have had the kind of year that, or at least similar to the kind of year that Lincoln Riley had in 2022. But I don't think that would have been the first year. Maybe the second year and again, it's just so hard to estimate because we don't know what quarterback we would have had. Caleb Williams was such a difference maker. He's obviously not coming if Matt Campbell's the coach. But yeah, I mean, I think we'd be in a similar spot. I don't know, but I think our outlook as a program right now is still better than Iowa State's. So I think Iowa State is projected to finish something like 4th in the Big 12, and the Big 12 is like, it's an all right conference, but it's not, USC would compete for a Big 12 championship today if you put them in the Big 12. So it's not, it's not the Big 12 it used to be, at least. But I think the last 3 years, like I said, would have been similar. I still am picking Lincoln Riley moving forward, though, just because of how the recruiting classes come together and just kind of how the outlook is. And the moves that he's made more recently have been encouraging in terms of getting guys in the building like Danton Lynn and all those guys. So.
And that really is the fascinating part of this, isn't it? Is that, it took Lincoln Riley a long time. And one could say it took Lincoln Riley and Jen Cohen a long time. And that brings up a point that, Lincoln Riley hired by Mike Bohn, then, Mike Bohn gets dismissed and Jen Cohen steps in. We have to ask, would Jen Cohen be USC's athletic director if Matt Campbell was the head coach? You would think, right, that Jen Cohen, she came aboard in August of or the summer of 2023. I think it was August. She had to think, well, I'm stepping into, a Cadillac job, and I've got Lincoln Riley with Caleb Williams, coming back after his Heisman season. Like, this is a job just set up to succeed. I mean, we can't get in someone else's mind for certain, but you have to think that's part of the allure of the USC job, not just in general, but the timing of it, right? That Jen Cohen had to think the timing was right for her to leave UW up in Seattle and go down to Southern California. I'm sure a part of her thought that this is a job made for me to succeed. Like, I shouldn't have to be worrying about coordinator firings. I shouldn't have to worry about, our recruiting, our NIL, any of that. And she got an education. And then she got an education because Lincoln Riley kept Alex Grinch. The 2023 season goes off the rails. And then Jen Cohen was, thrust into a kind of situation I'm sure she did not expect. So, Ethan, if Matt Campbell takes the USC job, do you think Jen Cohen goes for the USC job? And like that, like that's just the great unknown, because who would have been the AD if Jen Cohen wasn't? I don't know if you followed the summer or the AD search once Mike Bones left. Like, I didn't follow that search very closely. Any perspective on that piece of this puzzle?
Oh, another tough question, Matt. I think it's harder to convince Jen Cohen because, like you said, I mean, Lincoln Riley in the 2022 season created like reverberating benefits beyond just the 2022 season. I mean, like you said, kept some guys around, got some transfers in. That wouldn't have come if, they didn't think that they were coming to play for a national contender immediately. I think even the 2023 season they were just so good. Not so good, but they were good enough offensively, and it was so clear that the defense was so bad that, someone like Danton Lynn is willing to come to USC because he knows that, they're a defense away from being a really good powerhouse football team. Or they were, at least in 2023. And then, obviously you take a hit when someone like Caleb Williams leaves, but the offense was still, it was a more balanced team last year, even though it took, the offense took a step back and the defense took a step forward. It was still a more balanced team overall. I think, I mean, Lincoln Riley also just comes with the name value. He comes with the reputation. Matt Campbell has been a very successful football coach. I don't think comes with the same name value and recognition that Lincoln Riley does, especially like in recent history. The idea of working with Lincoln Riley in 2023 was like, Lincoln Riley was one of the hottest coaches in football. You would have been floored to work with Lincoln Riley. Matt Campbell, it's like, oh, I love Matt Campbell. I respect Matt Campbell. It's kind of a more humble Midwest opinion. You work at a humble Midwest program, you kind of get humble Midwest opinions on you also from outside perspectives. Like, I don't think Matt Campbell has any giant haters anywhere except for, maybe the fans of the NFL teams that he had stops at, possibly. But I just think, the same thing too. I don't think anybody's super fired up about Matt Campbell. I don't think if Matt Campbell gets hired by USC, the fans are super fired up either. I think, especially coming off of the disappointment that was Clay Helton, I think people are just kind of like, could have been worse, could have like rehired Dante Williams or something, and stuck with him, but it's not Lincoln Riley or any of those other top guys that USC was wanting. So I just think it's harder. But I think USC in 2023 was still, and even if they have kind of a ho-hum season, if 2022 was at least better than 2021, which it would have been hard for it to have been worse, it was at least like, a decent bit better than 2021. And you just are able to see opportunity as, I think Jen Cohen is someone who sees USC as a land of opportunity, regardless of who the head football coach is, just because of all the NIL opportunities here. It's a great school academically. There's just so many resources at your disposal for making these athletic programs good. And obviously Jen Cohen's not just concerned with the football program either. So, and, other programs were on the rise at that time as well, in terms of the women's basketball program. The men's basketball program had a lot of hype, kind of, fizzled out after, the last couple of years, but they still had a lot of hype around them. People thought they were going to be great. So I think I see it as more likely that she still gets hired, or someone of her caliber at least, just because of the great opportunity that exists at USC. I do think it's harder, though, for sure. It's a harder sell.
All right, so fascinating piece, and so Brock Purdy dishing about Matt Campbell and Lincoln Riley, taking us back to Thanksgiving weekend in November of 2021. Just one of the great what ifs. Like, that's a really intriguing USC flavored what if. But now we move to the present moment, and we said last week that this week's show was going to, include a Big Ten football media days preview. Media days are in Las Vegas, so the signal of the new era, the new West Coast presence in the Big Ten. And so, Ethan, we talked about the storylines for Big Ten media days before we started our show. To me, one eye grabber, before we get into USC specifically, is Dante Moore, Oregon's quarterback, being given the keys to the Ducks offense, not at Big Ten media days. That's notable. Your assessment of and before we really get into this, it's not as though, Oregon's quarterback's not going to be good because he wasn't invited to Big Ten media days. It's not really that. However, I do think there are some signals. There are clear tactical goals that a coaching staff has when it selects some players and doesn't select other players. So just with that in mind, your reaction to Dante Moore of Oregon not going to Big Ten media days in Vegas.
Right. So let me pull up the list real quick of everyone who's going to be there, just for everybody to have a little something to look at. I'll scroll down to Oregon just so we can have that for our discussion here. I believe I just passed them twice, didn't I? They're right there. So
we love to pass up Oregon here at USC. So
I guess symbolic.
Symbolic.
Love to pay them no attention. Love to at least want to pay them no attention, I suppose. We are forced to pay them attention in the last.
We'll pay them this much attention.
For sure.
But of course, we are talking about them.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's still a hot topic. I mean,
yes,
they're a loud, flashy program, even if they haven't won anything. So they're gonna get people's attention. They're gonna capture people's emotions for sure.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, I mean, if there's any Oregon fans watching this right now, I think they're going to come back and say something along the lines of, "Well, Jaden Maiava is not going to Big Ten media days either."
Yeah, touche.
Is a fair point. I think the reason why USC doesn't send someone like Jaden Maiava is pretty obvious, which is that Jaden Maiava is just not the greatest interview ever. I think Jaden Maiava is very shy, very quiet. He says a lot of great stuff. He's very program positive and just always exhibits real trust in the head coaching staff. He's not like a guy I don't think that you send when you want what he says to generate excitement for the program. I don't think he's just not the greatest interview ever, which is no knock on him. It's not, like a drawback of having Jaden Maiava as your quarterback. We want him to play good football. We don't want him to give good interviews as much. I mean, it's always great for us in the media when he does, but we want him to play good football first and foremost. So I think that's the clear answer there. Dante Moore, the answer is obviously less clear. We haven't seen him play any football. We haven't seen him take the media limelight as much. So that's why some more questions arise with him not being there for sure. And just also, Oregon football has had so many great leaders in the recent past in terms of, what Bo Nix did there with the program, just totally revived his career. I mean, Bo Nix was always one of the most exciting prospects, but just was so inconsistent at Auburn. And then he goes to Oregon and just turns, public perception of him does a complete 180 because of, just how he endears himself to the program endears itself to him, and just a match made in heaven, to be honest with you. Then Dylan Gabriel has a great final year there as well. And Dylan Gabriel is the most I think he has the most touchdowns of any quarterback ever, or like Dylan Gabriel's been around the block. He's played a lot of football. So you go from those to a sophomore quarterback who's completed 7 passes in his career, I think. Let me look at his ESPN page. Yeah, 7 for 8 in his career with 49 passing yards. He's not done anything. That's basically the point. And so I think there's a clear drop off there. So I mean, maybe he's being judged a little bit more harshly by the Oregon program for his leadership skills, just because they had 2 such fantastic, A1 leaders in their room these past couple of years. But I mean, maybe there is something to be said. You want to instill confidence in your guys, like we've talked about. Dante Moore is not necessarily like we've talked about an experienced quarterback, but he is like a flashy, eye-grabbing name. He has a lot of potential. He is a guy who you would kind of want to represent your brand, I would think, especially as a place like Oregon, which is, the flashier million uniforms, and great social media team, the Nike school, all that stuff. They've always been a culture adjacent school, if that makes sense. And Dante Moore is someone who, if he pans out, could be like a flashy superstar who gets a lot of the clicks and a lot of the social media attention, all that stuff. So I don't know. It's interesting. I think they're sending a linebacker, a tight end, and an outside linebacker. It's very clear that they're, to me, almost trying to supplement their identity that, I just talked about, of being flashy and fast and exciting, with being physical now that they're in the Big Ten. I think that that's very possible, especially probably after they got bullied in the Big Ten and not in the Big Ten, in the college football playoff against Ohio State last year. So
I was just about to say that Oregon picking of 2 linebackers and a tight end, that says, like, we know Ohio State bullied us. We know Ohio State threw us around like a dirty old rag, and we need to be so much tougher, on the big stage. I think that is a clear message. So it's a really interesting comparison, Ethan, between Jaden Maiava and Dante Moore, not just as quarterbacks in and of themselves, but, both programs not bringing the quarterbacks to Big Ten Media Days. You see on the screen, like, Northwestern's bringing its quarterback to Big Ten Media Days. And it just kind of, it gets you thinking, right, that, either you're a rock star program, like we also see Penn State bringing Drew Aller, because Drew Aller is supposed to be the dude. So, of course, you bring him to Big Ten Media Days. But then some people will say, why is Northwestern bringing its quarterback? Well, Northwestern has 0 expectations, right? Northwestern probably isn't expected to go to a bowl game. So you put your leader forth. It's not high-stakes poker for Northwestern. You want your leader to kind of feel good about himself. You want to put him in Vegas. You want to put him in front of the bright lights, see if, he grows from that, because Northwestern has nothing to lose. But at USC and Oregon, it's a situation where, these programs expect to succeed, and yet they know their quarterbacks are not fully proven. So you don't just want to put them up there and say, well, have the media just saying, well, do you think you're ready? Well, do you think you're going to prove yourself? Well, do you think you're going to do it? And that's just going to be repetitive, and they're probably just going to get sick and tired. It's not going to be a fun experience. So, these are the things that coaches need to think through. And I would say, just being serious, we're not trying to clown on Oregon all the time. We certainly love our little rib pokes here on the USC channel at the Voice of College Football. But we also try to tell it straight. And telling it straight, Dan Lanning made a good choice. He shouldn't have Dante Moore there. He needs to keep him kind of in the shadows. He needs to kind of slow walk his quarterback, because that is a question mark. It's a huge question mark. One could say it's the question mark for this Oregon team. So, if I were Dan Lanning, yes, I would have kept Dante Moore home as well. And Lincoln Riley, I think he made a smart decision to keep Jaden Maiava home. So I think both coaches are being smart about this. But as we get into this Maiava Moore comparison, Ethan, one of the things that I failed to do. So, I'm a public commentator. I have to say when I'm wrong. I have to own up. I have to take the L. Just be a man, be a grown up. That's part of the business. I took the L with Bo Nix. I thought he would struggle at Oregon. Bo Nix throws picks. That was the mantra at Auburn. And the thing I didn't account for was Oregon has an excellent offensive line. And that has been the heart of the Oregon football program and why it's been successful. Successful under Mario Cristobal, successful, a decade ago under Chip, and also, the Marcus Mariota 2014 Heisman season as well. The Oregon offensive lines keep the pocket clean. They put their quarterback in the best possible position to succeed. Bo Nix did not have that at Auburn. So I, a dum-dum, I thought, oh, look at all the stats at Auburn. And I did not carry into the equation, hey, Oregon has a skull crusher offensive line with big bad dudes who are going to keep Bo Nix clean. That's going to make Bo Nix a better quarterback. I being stupid, did not, put the 2 and 2 together there. That's also why Bo Nix had such a good rookie year with the Broncos, because Sean Payton built around the offensive line. He gave Bo Nix short, easy, high percentage passes to throw. That's how Bo Nix should be used, and that's how Bo Nix can be really effective. So I whiffed on Bo Nix, and so when we get back into this USC-Oregon comparison, people will be drawn to the 1 versus 1 comparison, Ethan. This guy versus that guy, Maava versus Moore. But in many ways, this is really the measurement of offensive lines, and is USC's offensive line ready to match the Oregon offensive line standard? Because Oregon sent Penei Sewell to the pros as a first-round pick, Josh Connerly to the NFL as a first-round pick. I mean, Oregon's really crushing it with its offensive line development and its offensive line portal pickups. And USC has not matched that standard, and that's why, Zach Hanson and this USC offensive line are so important. So when we compare Maava versus Dante Moore, Ethan, this is what I'm going to ask. What are the other details you think that we might be underrating or overlooking or missing? What are the other puzzle pieces that we as analysts, but also all the fans sitting at home watching here at the Voice of College Football need to be accounting for? Because it's not just one guy versus one guy and we compare stats on a sheet. No, there's a lot more that goes into all of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to think about the recruitment and the development of these two quarterbacks. I mean, Dante Moore is a guy who was sitting at UCLA before he went to Oregon, and then Jaden Maaba is a guy who USC picked up from UNLV. So Dante Moore kind of started out more as that D1 prospect. He didn't really play at UCLA, again, 7 for 8, but was the a guy who was a little bit more highly regarded before he went to Oregon versus in terms of his recruitment, that is. I mean, Maava played a lot at UNLV and did a lot at UNLV. And I'm not discounting that at all, but in terms of the starting place, I think in the sense, in terms of media day, I think it's almost more interesting, I think, from taking off my USC hat for a minute, from a just general college football fans standpoint, that Maava isn't there just because he has more experience and has been the leader of the USC offense before, versus Dante Moore has never been there. So it makes, again, perfect sense that he's not considered a representative of the Oregon program because he's never been in the Oregon program before. But the offensive line, you make a really good point, because we talked a little bit last week about how USC is sending Elijah Page, and that was kind of our big storyline from the representatives that USC is picking, is that Elijah Page is going. And that obviously could go one of two ways. That's either, and I think it's a little bit of both of these actually, which is a, kind of a sign of confidence in Elijah Page, and also a way to boost his confidence as well. It's we're confident in you, from a very PR standpoint, but also in the back of our heads, we're trying to make you more confident so you can step up and be this big dog at left tackle. So, I mean, it's definitely a bold move if you're USC to send Elijah Page, because I think it invites a little bit more scrutiny on him. I mean, you're sending him alongside two guys who are very proven and who are very clearly going to be stars on this team, in Kamari Ramsey and in Mekhi Lemon. So, I mean, if he goes and has the kind of, if he goes and has a disappointing season, if he regresses from last year, doesn't really get any better, or, has another game like Michigan where he goes on the road to a Big Ten program and just completely falls apart. Some of those media guys, especially those West Coast media guys who, it's a little bit easier to travel to Las Vegas this year, that were at Big Ten Media Days and remember Elijah Page being there, are going to look at it a little bit like, he was supposed to be this big representative of the program, and now he's, kind of a weak link. But anyway, I do think, but I'm high on Elijah Page. I think he's going to do well. I think it's more the rest of the offensive line that USC has to worry about. I mean, the news came out the other day that DJ Wingfield is still fighting for eligibility. They don't know if he's going to get it. That's the transfer they got out of Purdue. And then, there's some other plug and play transfer guys and some other, younger guys who just haven't really proven themselves yet. And so it's just a little bit all over the place. But it's still a good sign that someone like Elijah Page is someone that can represent USC, just because he's a development success story. If he does turn out to be a star, if he does turn out to be kind of the class of the Big Ten at left tackle, then that's, good job USC. You developed a star left tackle. That's difficult to do, and they've obviously had a lot of trouble doing that. I do think the other thing that's, going to be a big storyline for these quarterbacks, outside of themselves and how they play, is going to be just their receiving core, because I think USC's receiving core has gotten a lot of preseason attention. But again, it's based a lot on potential and not based a lot on, production. I mean, Jacoby Lane had like an incredible end to last season, but he hasn't put up those numbers over a full season yet. And then Mekhi Lemon had a lot more of a consistently productive season, but it was still just a little bit up and down, and not a 1,000-yard season by any means, at least. So I think from a USC perspective, you really want to see those guys. And again, Mekhi Lemon's a representative, so they anticipate him being a star and they want him to be representative of the program. You want to see those guys really step up and really be superstars like everybody thinks that they're going to be. And then you take a little bit of the pressure off Maava, and then, you're not, and then everybody kind of benefits. Everybody's a little bit better in the media's eyes. The receivers have a great season. They get all the flowers. Maava gets all the flowers. And, we're all happy about how that all turned out, for sure. So, and then, Oregon, it's always a story as well. They have a lot of receivers that they've sent to the NFL recently. And like I said, big, flashy skill position school that loves their skill position players. Everybody's going to have a big eye on them as well. So that's a position around the quarterback that I think is going to factor in a lot this year with those two.
All right, so Big Ten Media Days, let's put the focus squarely on USC for a moment here. In college football, when coaches are hired, people talk about, winning the press conference. Did he really connect with the fan base and the culture and the expectations? And, media days are kind of that same thing. Is the coach saying the right things? Is he setting the right tone? Is he striking the right balance? And, coaches speaking in public, like, they're paid to win games. They're not paid to make great speeches. Deshaun Foster of UCLA very memorably just was deer in the headlights at Big Ten Media Days a year ago, but he actually coached very well. UCLA overachieved. Just about everyone would say UCLA overachieved last season. Still didn't get to a bowl because they're the Bruins, but UCLA was thought by many to be like a 2-10, 3-9 team. Bruins go 5-7. Deshaun Foster coached his butt off last season. So the fact that his speech at Big Ten Media Days was a disaster, it was not an indicator of any sort in terms of how good UCLA was going to be, how well positioned UCLA was. The public speaking, how you carry yourself in front of a podium, that's very different from how you coach on Saturday. So there's no clean correlation between the two. That said, it's going to be a point of interest what Lincoln Riley says. And so, Ethan Inman, I'm going to ask you what you would like to see or perhaps hear from Lincoln Riley at Big Ten Media Days, and I'm going to give my answer up front while you think about yours. I just want Lincoln Riley to take ownership of his mistakes. That's what I want. I want some humility from Lincoln Riley, but not in that kind of syrupy, old timey way that coaches do, like Lou Holtz, playing possum. He'd make Notre Dame or South Carolina out to be the little sisters of the poor. I don't want that. That's kind of false humility, right? I want Lincoln Riley to just say, you know what, we're going upward at USC because of this great recruiting class that Chad Bowden has brought in. There were things about the college football business I thought I knew, but I didn't, and I needed help. And now I have that help, and I'm thrilled that USC is supporting me. That's the kind of thing I'd like to see and hear from Lincoln Riley at Big Ten Media Days. I don't want him talking up 2025 unless he's ready to deliver. Okay, so doesn't necessarily matter whether he talks up this year's team or not. It's just if he chooses to go that route, well, okay, buddy, you need to follow through. I want to see some humility where Lincoln Riley is not getting ahead of his skis. I want him to kind of be level-headed and to just, you and I have talked about this, Ethan. We don't want him to act like he's the smartest guy in the room. That's when Lincoln Riley steps into a pothole, right? That's what I want to get from Big Ten Media Days, that Lincoln Riley just has an extra ounce of humility, and he's willing to convey that in public instead of carping about, being behind the curve and not having resources and, well, we were playing catch up. I don't want whining. I don't want him to puff out his chest either. I want some candor and honesty that comes with a little bit of, self-knowledge that shows that Lincoln Riley is ready to put himself in his own modest place. That's what I want to get from Lincoln Riley. What about you?
I think that's a great point, Matt. I think that, as someone who's been around the USC football program pretty consistently for the last 3 years, I covered all of the home games and a handful of the away games. So I heard a lot of Lincoln Riley, and I feel like, and I heard a lot of my fellow media members as well. And I feel like everybody's frustration with him was just that he was so positive. He had always had a very positive spin, even the most devastating moment for USC in the past, in Lincoln Riley's tenure, basically was losing the Pac-12 championship game against Utah. And even then it was a lot of man, Caleb Williams went out and put out a heroic effort, and just what he did on his leg. A lot of the focus was let's celebrate Caleb Williams and his season, and Caleb Williams deserved celebration for his competitiveness. I often go back, and something that I like to relitigate is thinking about if Lincoln Riley kind of put his foot down and put Miller Moss in that game, how USC would have fared. I still don't think they would have won. I just think it's an interesting thing to kind of think about sometimes. But he's just always, let's celebrate Caleb Williams for, trying to fight through his leg injury, even though, he couldn't run, and it was completely fizzled out the USC offense because he couldn't do anything compared to what he normally could. And, a lot of that. Last year, the recurring sentence that I heard a lot was, we were 1 or 2 plays away from winning. And that's not inaccurate. I mean, if you watched the football games, that was often true. I mean, Penn State, Minnesota, even Michigan to an extent, a lot of these games against big high-profile programs, you change 1 or 2 plays, the outcome of 1 or 2 plays, and you can directly see how that leads to a USC win. It's true. It's not false. It's not like he's lying. But it's just, it conveys this unspoken, kind of satisfaction with, oh, we put forward a great effort. We just were 1 or 2 plays away.
We came close.
Yeah. We got unlucky. Close only matters in horseshoes and hand grenades, as they say. So, it's still a loss. It goes down in the scorebook as an L. And, like you did very, very nicely earlier, like 10 minutes ago, you have to take your L's sometimes. And he just refused to take his L's. He was always very looking for moral victories. And I'm not anti-positivity. I'm a pretty positive, optimistic guy myself. I like to hear positivity and confidence. And,
but we don't want to relive Clay Helton. That's what he did. Lincoln Riley's not supposed to be Clay Helton.
Yep. Lincoln Riley's not Clay Helton. And just when it becomes a pattern, these things get old. Like you can say that against Michigan and you can say that against Penn State, but when you're saying that against Maryland, it's like we're a better team than Maryland. Yeah, sure, we were 1 or 2 plays away from winning, but we never should have been 1 or 2 plays away from winning. We should have been, 2 or 3 touchdowns ahead of winning. That's kind of the problem is, USC is not a program that's content with eking out wins, especially against inferior opponents like Washington, Maryland. Those were games we should have blown the door off of them in the second quarter, and it shouldn't have even been a worry by the time the fourth quarter came around. So I just think, more accountability, like you said, a little bit more like we're not just looking to win football games, we're looking to dominate football games. I would like to hear that from him. A couple just other smaller storylines that I think would be interesting. I'm sure he'll get questions about, the new strength coach. I'd love to hear what he thinks of Tremaine Carroll. I think that'll be really interesting. I also would be interested to hear what he has to say about continuing the USC Notre Dame rivalry, because we've, very prominently heard Marcus Freeman's comments, which is, I'm not, whether this is true of Notre Dame or not, Marcus Freeman is certainly winning the PR war by saying, I'll take on USC anytime, anywhere. I always want to play USC, period. He can say that. He's in, a great position to say that with the year Notre Dame had last year. We don't know if the university actually thinks that, but that's what Marcus Freeman is saying. And that's the kind of attitude I'd like to hear from Lincoln Riley, even if, because what are the consequences if behind closed doors, the university doesn't feel that way. It's just Lincoln Riley sharing his personal opinion. Like I want confidence and I just want more, I'd like to see him seeking to dominate football games more than just, like you said, compete and almost win football games. So those are the 2 main things. A few players too that I'm interested in hearing. It's obviously going to be super interesting to hear what he has to say on Maava. And the 3 guys that are there for sure. And just also some of the younger guys. The defensive line, I think, is something to keep an eye on just because it's so big, so much bigger now. Defensive line obviously had a subpar season last year, but there's a lot of really promising guys. So going to be paying close attention to that. But the main thing is just confidence and also, just mainly confidence and seeking to win football games by more than, enough of this, like, hey, we did a pretty good job, and we could have won if 1 or 2 plays went differently. Like, no, that's not enough. We want to take care of teams and win games by long before the fourth quarter comes around, and we have any chance to screw it up.
All right, folks, we have one more segment in our show, about 15 more minutes of college football talk coming your way here on the USC channel at the Voice of College Football. But first, before that final segment, a word from our sponsor. We will see you in about 50 seconds. Here's our sponsor.
You can make a difference here at the Voice of College Football. Use the Amazon link. Financially contribute to the Voice of College Football without spending a penny. Same shopping experience. It's easy. Go to any video on any channel. Go to the description section and grab the link right next to the capital letters that say Amazon. Use that link, and Amazon will instantaneously convert to your account, settings, history, everything intact, just like whatever link you use right now. No difference. Pay no attention to the product that you see right there. Just go search what you want. Don't forget the Amazon link. Thank you for your support. Sincerely, the Voice of College Football.
All right, we ride into our final segment here on the USC channel at the Voice of College Football, USC Trojans Primetime Live. He's Ethan Inman. I'm Matt Zemek. A really good question from our friend Gerardo Zalata. Gerardo, thank you so much. Always good questions, good insights from you. We've received a letter from the interim USC president discussing upcoming cuts in staffing and top salaries. Do you see those cuts affecting the athletic department? Gerardo, excellent question. That's really important news. A lot of people around USC are talking about it. That's a big story. Thanks for bringing it up. To me, Gerardo, and obviously, Ethan, I'm going to ask you for your reaction to this, but to me, this cements Lincoln Riley as USC's coach next season, barring something crazy. I wrote at Trojans Wire, or we covered the story at Trojans Wire, but I also write at College Sports Wire, the other another College Wire partner site under the USA Today umbrella. And I said, this is going to cement Lincoln Riley for next season unless he goes 5-7. I think 7-5 would be a clear-cut failure. It would be really frustrating. We would all have pitchforks in our hands. I would, maybe Ethan would. I know just about everybody in the chat sure would. But I don't think he's getting fired if USC goes 7-5, because with all these cuts, limitations, transitioning, juggling the books, whatever you want to call it, you're not going to eat a Lincoln Riley buyout now, unless it's just complete fall off a cliff. And failing to make a bowl game would be the fall off a cliff. You have to start fresh. But with that 2026 recruiting class coming in and this situation, I think that the main story about the cuts and the financial precarity USC faces, to me, Ethan, the main takeaway is Lincoln Riley is going to coach next season unless he falls off a cliff. Your reaction?
Yeah, on Gerardo's question of if this is going to affect the athletic department, is it going to affect the football team beyond what you said in terms of it being a really ugly PR move and also an ugly financial move to get rid of Lincoln Riley next year if they don't make, if they're being picky about it, at least. I think other than that, does it affect the football team? No, it doesn't. I really don't think so. I think a lot of people tie together the athletic department's financials and the school's financials and act as if they're one and the same thing. The fact of the matter is that they aren't. That's kind of just how college, financial situations work. USC has a massive budget of billions of dollars, that apart from just the athletic department, in terms of academics and, a whole host of other things that USC is investing a lot of money into. So, and, despite the financial trouble, which has been brewing for a few years, this is not something that came out of nowhere. It's been building up a little bit. USC's been, full steam ahead on building the football facility, rebuilding the baseball field, building the new soccer field, getting everything ready for the Olympics, presumably, and also just, new eras and NIL and all this stuff in their college sports. It's been a total revamping. If you walk around campus, it's just a massive construction zone all the time. So I think that's a clear sign that while the school may be struggling, the athletic department really probably isn't. I think, donors are investing as much as they ever have. I think, I just think the deficit is more of a Carol Folt / academics side of things problem than it is a Jen Cohen athletics side of things issue. Obviously, Carol Folt's gone out. That mentioned the interim president that's now having to deal with kind of the deficit. I think if it affects any of the athletic programs, it's going to be some of those smaller schools or some of those smaller teams, rather. The teams that don't even have enough scholarships to give one to every player on the team. They're having to divide, which is how it is at every sport at every school. It's not a unique USC thing, but they have to divide the scholarships up amongst the beach volleyball players, and the top 3 players may get full ride, and then you may have 6 more that get half ride, and whatever. That's how it is for a lot of the sports beyond the basketballs and football. So, and baseball to some extent. So I think if it affects any of the athletic programs, it'll be those. I don't really see football being affected too much beyond just it looks really ugly if you're we're in $200 million in debt. And also we're paying, tens of millions of dollars to get rid of our head football coach, who we will then have to pay, millions more dollars to bring in a new one that the fans will be happy with. even though it's separate operating, budgets, and people don't donate money to the athletic program that they then take and give to the school, and vice versa. That's not how it works. If you give money to the football team, your expectation is that they're going to put it towards the football team. That's, so it's two different budgets, two different, pots, if you want to put it that way. So yeah, I don't think the football team's affected too much besides what you said, because it's just an ugly PR move, because people don't understand that the budgets are separate things. So then you just get a bunch of unneeded backlash about, they're just getting themselves in more debt and panic about USC and, all this bad PR stuff, basically.
All right, Ethan, we got another good question here from our friend Gixer Squid. Gixer asks, with the new TAF and decreased ticket prices, do you anticipate we'll fill more seats this year? Disheartening seeing so many empty seats. Hard to compete with other LA distractions. Now, this is something that, it's always a topic of conversation, or almost always. When Pete Carroll was rocking and rolling, everything was filled. But since then, this is just a constant point of conversation. Your thoughts about Gixer's question? Will there be more seats filled at the Coliseum this year?
I think it solely depends on if we're going to win football games. And that's the unfortunate, harsh reality from someone that has been to all of the games, all the home games since 2021. People come when you're winning and they don't when you're not. And
okay.
That's
pretty direct to the point answer. Let me then just follow up. The first 3 games are Missouri State, Georgia Southern, at Purdue. So you'd think USC is going to be 3-0 heading into the home game against Michigan State. That's going to be the first indicator, right? What do you think? What would you say right now would be ballpark for Michigan State attendance? I'm saying like 50. I'd put it like 57, 58.
Yeah, 60,000 is my guess.
Yeah, because he is just so cupcake rich those first 3 weeks. So I don't think that the joint's going to be filled for that one. Michigan, no. You'd think they'll fill it up.
Yeah, I think it'll be, 30% Michigan fans, but I think it'll be full of somebody. I mean, I have kind of a pessimistic take on that, just because it's so disappointing to me. I think that USC fans, love our keyboard warriors. They love to spread a lot of negativity online about how unhappy they are with the program, but they don't often put their money where their mouth is and, and actually invest in the program at all. Don't support the program. They just, want to call everybody out. And, they're entitled to do that. They have First Amendment rights. I'm not going to tell anybody how to live their life or anything like that. But man, it's just disappointing to compare yourself to some of these other places in the Big Ten and the SEC where they have bad football teams every year. Nebraska is a great example. They've been horrible for 30 years.
75,000, they show up. Yep.
Every single Saturday. And yes, it's a different world in Lincoln than it is in LA, but still, I mean, we also there's also the population difference to account for. Like, we just have more people in LA. So there's a million things to do, but there's also millions of more people here. So you would think that, there'd be at least the decent percentage of football fans. And I think that there are, because they come out of the woodworks when we're good. It's just a real fair weather culture, and a culture that'll turn real negative real fast when things aren't going, swimmingly. I don't know. I want to be at the Coliseum every week, regardless of if we're good. I went to BYU USC in 2021 when we were 4-7, Thanksgiving weekend, and there was maybe 200 students at the game. And it was a great game. I'm so glad I went. It was a fantastic game. USC lost at the last second. It was one of my favorite football games of my college career. And if I, had let my pessimism, take over, I wouldn't have gone. And obviously, thousands of other students and fans didn't, because I'd say it was predominantly BYU. That was how sorry the state of the USC football attendance was. So I don't know, just the love for if people really loved it as much as they claim they do, I think that they would be there regardless. And they love to be on their high horse and say, oh, we're holding the program accountable if we don't pay money when they're not winning. Yeah, but why let that dictate your happiness so much? Show up to some games and watch football and have a great time, and don't let that kind of stuff. And you can still be very vocal about, hey, this is what we want to see. And, the program still wants to make money. They're going to, regardless of if 50,000 people come every week, they want 70,000 people to come, and they want that, they can elevate ticket prices if it's a hot ticket game and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I don't know. It's always disappointing to me, but I think the only way we have a sellout that's 90 to 95% USC fans is if we're undefeated very late in the season. That's just the state of USC football right now.
Yeah. I think the point about, fans trying to hold the program accountable by, not buying tickets, you do that when a season has gone off the rails. You do that when you know that the team is underachieving or the coaching staff is underachieving. Like, you don't do it early in the season. See, here's the thing I think a lot of fans miss, the people who don't regularly show up. Early in the season, if you're filling a stadium for a 2-0 or 3-0 team, and USC should be 3-0 going into Michigan State, filling that stadium early in the season, even if it's not a sexy opponent, that sends a message to all the players and coaches. We're behind you. Like, we're giving you a chance. Maybe the season doesn't turn out the way we all hope, but at the start, we are here. But again, if it falls off the rails, then yeah, like if the team is 7-4, why are you going to that late season game? Like,
Friday,
to me, that makes sense. That makes sense as a protest because you were expecting more, you didn't get it. That's fair. But at the start of the season, if the team has not yet done anything to, not merit your trust or your faith, be there because that gives them a push into the middle of the season. That gives them a signal, a clear, tangible demonstration that, this fan base wants us to do well. So for people who don't show up to early season games, it's a particular point of emphasis. I'm not talking about the full season. I'm talking about early in the season. Okay, it's Missouri State. It's Georgia Southern. So what? Show up. Give this team a push into the rest of this season. Players will be impressed. And recruits will be too. Now, that's another thing. Why not make the statement early in the season? If things go south, okay, yeah. Why continue to shell out money? That makes sense. But be there at the start. That's my thought. All right. So final segment. And once again, we don't go into our shows planning certain things just for kicks. We relate them to the news cycle. And what's going on. And so earlier this week, we had, of course, the swing off, the home run derby deciding the Major League Baseball All-Star game. That's a first. So and this is the slowest week of the sports year, right? There's been practically nothing the past 4 days, other than the All-Star game, the home run derby. But so Friday, baseball starts again, and then you have the NFL preseason, college football training camp. Just around the corner, and of course, Big Ten Media Days next week. Next week's show, it's going to be all about Big Ten Media Days. But this has been a slow sports week, so the talk of the town was that home run derby, and so this makes it the right time to discuss college football overtime and whether this format needs any tweaking. So, Ethan, obviously, I'm going to get your thoughts on this, but to me, when we consider college football overtime. And when we compare it to baseball, because the baseball All-Star game is what got everyone talking. Some people said, "Hey, this home run derby is better than the Ghost Runner," and I had to caution some people on Twitter by saying, "Wait a minute, you do not want a batting practice pitcher to decide games. That's not real baseball. Like, they had the batting practice fence on the field, so it just became practice. It's not real baseball." I don't like the Ghost Runner. But it's still real baseball. And you still need to get that runner home from second with nobody out. Lots of bad teams, like the Pittsburgh Pirates, usually don't score a run, even when they have a runner at second with nobody out to start the inning. Really bad teams, they don't score that run. Good teams will score that run. But there's still some craft, right? Runner at second, nobody out. Hit a fly ball, hit a grounder to the right side, move the runner up, and then get that. 2 ground balls or 2 sacrifice flies, you score the runner. That's good fundamental baseball. There is still a sense of you have to do things the right way. You have to play baseball the right way to score that run. But the really salient point, the comparison and connection to make with college football, a runner on second with nobody out in extra innings is like having the ball on the 25-yard line to start overtime. In other words, you're in scoring position. 25-yard line, you are in scoring position. 42-yard field goal. Runner at second, nobody out. You're in scoring position without having advanced the runner or the ball to that point. So to me, the obvious change, like I would play real baseball, no ghost runner. So you have to actually score your run in the 10th inning. College football should go to, you start on the 50-yard line in overtime because you're not starting in scoring position. You have to get at least one first down. Like if your kicker can reach 55 yards, you need to get to the 38-yard line. You need to get at least 12 yards to be in position to score. So to me, that's the very specific comparison in terms of baseball overtime and college football overtime. So I would say you start at the 50, but here's the other thing. And obviously, Ethan, you'll get to lay out your preferred plan, your preferred format in a bit, but let me just round out my plan. I think it should just be 2 possessions. Team A gets a possession, Team B gets a possession, and if they tie, it's a tie. And so people will say, that sounds kind of minimalist. Like there's no extra tiebreaker mechanism like a home run derby, like a 2-point conversion playoff that college football currently has. Here's the thing. Coaches so often, they kick the PAT at the end of regulation instead of going for 2 in the win. When they're down 1 point, they usually kick the PAT, mostly in college, mostly in the pros. So in my mind, the whole purpose of a constrained, limited overtime in any sport, including baseball, baseball uses the ghost runner so that games won't go 15, 18 innings and pitching staffs are going to get destroyed in one game. Like I get that. It makes sense. It's smart. You're playing 162 games. You can't have 15-inning, 16-inning games on a regular basis. You needed to contain that. So the ghost runner is the attempt to do that. I get it. But in many ways, we shouldn't be asking, is it really fair to decide overtime in a certain way? No, the question we should be asking, like this is the deeper conversation for me, is how do we incentivize coaches not playing for overtime, not playing for a tie, just hoping they'll resolve that tie, they'll break that tie later. Even in first overtimes in college football, Ethan, like you watch enough ball to know this just as well as I do. In first overtimes, coaches aren't willing to go for 2 and the win. They kick the PAT, they go to the second overtime, and only then, is the 2-point conversion mandatory. Like coaches will just stretch this out as long as they can. So creating incentives for coaches to go for the win earlier in regulation, as soon as possible, that should be the thing. So my other piece of this plan where we just have 2 possessions, we don't have these 8 overtime innings like that Georgia Tech Georgia game on Thanksgiving last year. We just have 2 possessions. But here's the thing. If Team A, the team with the first possession, scores a touchdown and a PAT, then Team B has to do better than Team A to get the win. So if Team B can choose to tie. Team B can choose to kick the PAT and create what would be a tie. Because again, just 2 possessions, that's it. But if Team B chooses the tie, intentionally plays for the tie, then there should be a rule in any conference tiebreaker or in any college football playoff tiebreaker. That team, if a team is in position to win with a 2-point conversion, but chooses to kick the PAT for the tie, that team is second. That team is second in line or last in line in any multi-team tiebreaker. So that would be the incentive for not only going for 2 in overtime, but playing to win in regulation. Because I think that is the deeper conversation we need to have in college football, in baseball, in terms of how we resolve ties, how we deal with overtime. So there are a lot of layers to this, and just that MLB All-Star game brought them all out. So Ethan, your plan for college football overtime, and if you want to include baseball in that, be my guest.
Well, my opinion is going to be different than yours, and it's going to be different than a lot of people's, just because I am, and so I'm going to qualify this with, I'm going to give my opinion, and then I'm going to give my realistic approach that I think makes everybody happy. I love to see as much sports as possible. I like every time I'm at a game or I'm watching a game, baseball. I'll use baseball as an example, and it's tied at the end of the ninth inning. I'm like, fantastic, free baseball. I'm always excited about it, and that also I think comes a little bit from me growing up, being a kid, being at games, and there not really being any consequences for me if I have to stay for 3 or 4 more innings, because it's just like, oh, I get to watch more baseball. Like I don't have to get home and go to sleep to go to work in the morning, especially if it's like a weekend or whatever. I'm always, and if it is a school night, I'm complaining because I'm invincible. I'm 12, and I don't think that losing 2 hours of sleep is going to kill me. So I'm just like, Mom, Dad, like why do I need to go home? Why do I need to go to bed? I'm watching baseball. Let me watch more baseball. And I grew up a big baseball fan, so that was often the case. I was big games, and I would always ask to stay up a little bit later than my bedtime to watch, and sometimes that was granted, sometimes it wasn't. But I always wanted to, regardless. So the more sports, the better for me personally. I love epic 18-inning playoff battles where no runs are scored for 9 innings. I think that that's wonderful. I love watching like random relief pitchers throw basically the equivalent of a full start, because that's the only choice the team has. That to me is fantastic. But I understand that that's not for everyone. I also, I'm in the camp that loves the 8 overtime Georgia Tech. But me personally, like, I just love sports. I love to see more sports. I love to see these crazy situations where players have to do really unorthodox things, whether that's, pitchers hitting, position players pitching. You go to football, you run a wildcat play for the 2-point conversion. I don't know, just like crazy stuff where it's like, we got to do, something crazy to keep this going, whatever. I do so basically, like, given all of that context, the baseball home run derby thing was a real affront to me at first. When I found out that it was happening, I was like, this is great for the All-Star game. I'm sure it'll be entertaining. And I turned the game on because it had never happened before. I hadn't been watching the game before. I turned it on just so I could see, how it kind of played out. But I was like, I have a feeling people are going to like this, and then they're going to want it in real baseball, and I want it as far away from real baseball as possible. I hate the ghost runner. I'm super against it. I've seen too many teams that I felt like deserve to lose games because the other team gets a free runner at second base. I hate it. It's bad. For me, just because I've grown up watching so much baseball. I think the system that I've always proposed is you like you said, you have a 10th inning with no runners on base, and then you maybe progressively move the runner up. Like maybe the 11th inning you put a runner on first, the 12th inning you put a runner on second, the 13th inning you put a runner on third. Maybe you put runners on second and third in the 14th inning. I don't know. At some point you run out of options, and then maybe you go to the home run derby in like the 18th inning or whatever. So at first I was like, oh yeah, I don't know how I would feel. But then I thought about hockey, and Matt, well, just because I talked about it a little bit when the Kings were in the playoffs. I'm a pretty big hockey guy. And I do think that the hockey overtime model is one of the best in sports, if not the best. I think that, the NFL, honestly, to me, is the NFL and the NBA are like kind of neither here nor there. The NFL is slightly below the NBA to me, just because they can never figure out what they actually want to commit to. It's like, oh, one year it's the team that scores first and scores a touchdown wins. And then the next year it's like, oh, just because Josh Allen lost to Patrick Mahomes, we have to change how it's been done for decades and decades now. So I think like that lack of commitment frustrates me sometimes. But I think hockey is pretty clearly college football. I've always liked too. I think one of my favorite games that I went to was the USC Arizona game. In hindsight, in the moment, didn't love it. Didn't love being that close with an Arizona team, and so much anxiety. But looking back, it was a lot of fun. Seeing Mason Cobb make that play at the end, fantastic. One of the favorite plays that I saw in my USC career. I love how the stakes just kind of keep, getting, more and more exciting. Same thing kind of happens in hockey. I guess it's kind of similar in soccer too, with the penalty kicks if you get that far. But hockey is just a more exciting sport than soccer. Sorry, it's true. So I do think that hockey's kind of got to
should college football overtime start at the 25-yard line?
Yeah. I don't think it needs to change too much. I'm in the camp that it's pretty good the way
works.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it works. Kind of similar to hockey. I think the only thing that hockey has on it is that hockey has a clear out. Technically you could just be matching each other on penalty shots forever, but that's just not what happens. It's hockey. Making a hockey shot is a lot difficult. That is I think a lot lower difficulty percentage wise than scoring a 2-point conversion from what I've seen, just, based on how, college football games go longer. The proof is in the process. You can see it. So I think hockey has more of a hard out, but yeah, it's not like in baseball where if it goes 8 overtimes, you're really wearing out anybody. And also you see 16 more plays, in the last 5 overtimes. I think it's kind of fine how it is. And I think if anything, the home run derby finish kind of only further accentuated that, because the 2-point conversion is really the kind of the final boss. I'm not a fan of ties either. I want to see a team win if I spend all that time.
I was going to ask, should games end in ties? Do we need to bring that back to college football? Because remember, that change occurred in the mid-1990s. Before then, ties happened. That change occurred in the mid-1990s. I believe 96, could be 95, basically 30 years ago. So you don't want ties, period.
No, I think head-to-head matters too much in calculating who's going to be in the college football playoff, and I don't want to see ties. I think it's kind of the best. It's the best way to resolve it as quickly and as fairly as possible. The only thing that's even lower stakes and even quicker is just having people kick field goals, and kind of similar to having my batting practice pitcher decide the game. I don't want my kicker deciding the game for the whole team. I couldn't even imagine. Kickers already get so much, hate and scrutiny. I can't imagine if in the 8th overtime, your kicker missed their 7th field goal attempt in a row, and just the online hate that would ensue. It would force kickers to be better, I guess, but yeah. So I think it's good how it is. I'm kind of in favor, but yeah, we'll have to disagree, I suppose.
It's just, it's notable that, the home run derby, it involves a batting practice pitcher, and no other sport has that equivalent. If football went to a field goal kicking a field goal contest, that's still real football. Kick a place kicker kicking a kick. There's no outside presence. A hockey shootout is just, one-on-one, goalkeeper, goaltender. Soccer, penalty kicks, it's just one-on-one. A home run derby, these people need to realize this. Anyone who says home run derby is a great way to litigate a regular season baseball game, not an exhibition. It was perfect for the All-Star game, but a regular season game, you are including your batting practice pitcher. So basically, if you need an acquisition at the trade deadline, you throw $1 million at a batting practice pitcher, the guy who can groove the balls. Come on, do we realize how insane that would be? So really just everything exists in a different category. All right, Ethan, one more piece of this, because it's just such a fascinating thing to talk about. In soccer, there's 3 points for a win, 1 point for a draw, 0 points for a loss. In hockey, 2 points for a win, 1 point for an overtime loss, 0 for a regulation loss. I think that this discussion about college football overtime inspired by what we saw at the MLB All-Star game. To me, like, the more I think about it, and this is part of incentivizing coaches to play for the win in regulation as soon as possible. I think that is definitely something we should be promoting, incentivizing in all sports, because we want games to end sooner. Like, that's part, Major League Baseball has shaved off 35 minutes of playing time. College football, running clock, right? College football games last shorter now. Now that with the running clock on first downs in the middle of the game, the money is so big in every major sport that there is a definite financial interest, also a human interest. Like, we want these athletes to be healthy for full seasons. So it's in the interest of the whole industry and the product to shorten the length of games. So that goes back to, we should incentivize coaches going for the win earlier rather than later. You're not kicking the can down the road, which is how you get an 8 overtime Georgia Tech game. Just coaches just delaying the winning play until as far as possible. So in terms of incentivizing coaches going for the win in regulation, I'm really at a place intellectually, Ethan. And again, you're a big hockey guy, you're a big LA Kings guy. To me, I think the time has come to do point systems in all sports. And so like soccer and hockey being kind of two templates, to me, we should have in college football, and I think all the other sports, you get maximum points. So I would say 3 points for a regulation win. You get 2 points for an overtime win. You get 1 point for an overtime loss, and you get 0 points for a regulation loss. So the key point is, in the NHL, 2 points for any kind of win. I think you give more points for the regulation win than the OT win, because you tied at the end of regulation. That's not as good as winning a game in regulation. And I think doing this for all sports, encourage and promote the value of winning a game in regulation. And just to kind of tie it all together here, to my plan, 2 possessions in college football overtime from the 50-yard line, and team B, if you choose the tie, you get less credit. So to me, if the second team, not talking about the first team, because the first team just is operating with a blank slate, but if the second team chooses the tie, that team doesn't get the full value of the victory. Or the full value of the tie, I should say, compared to the other team. So I really do think it's time for a point system in college football and in all other sports. Regulation win, OT loss, regulation loss. Let's really make it more valuable for coaches to win games in regulation. What do you say about this notion of going, not to win-loss in the standings, but points accumulated based on whether you're winning in regulation or in overtime?
I think I kind of really like the plan, actually, especially because I've kind of, given up on my crusade to take the Ghost Runner out of baseball that I had the first couple of years. I think that winning with the Ghost Runner should be perceived as less valuable. And I think that losing with the Ghost Runner should be perceived as less of like a total loss. I think that's one example where it's very clearly not the same, dynamic of game. Like kind of like you said, I mean, you almost have to score 2 runs in extra innings now, because if you score 1, the other team can essentially, bunt the guy over, hit a long fly ball, hit a, ground ball that's not a hard one right to the third baseman. And then they, one run is like making par. Exactly. 2 runs is a birdie. Yeah. Right. And 0 runs is the bogey. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's a clear example. I also think this could play really interestingly, bringing this back to college football, into the college football playoff, like figuring that out. I think if you weigh regulation wins more heavily and weigh regulation losses less heavily, like, for example, let's say, USC was in contention last season, but they still lost to Penn State. The Penn State loss looks a little less, a little less, it's a little less bad on their resume. They have more of a resume to get in. They get credit, and rightfully so, I think, for being tied with the top team in the country at the end of the game. That deserves credit. You don't really, maybe then Lincoln Riley, as we taking it back to another segment we did on the show, maybe his we were 2 plays away from winning sounds a little bit better, and he can actually say that because they did salvage the 1 point out of it, and the close wasn't just valuable in horseshoes and hand grenades. It was good there. I think, yeah. So I think that would be good. I think it just gives teams an extra degree of separation. If you're dominating games, it's more clear because you're getting 3 points every game. If you're kind of scraping by teams, maybe you're getting 2 points in some games, and then maybe you end up a couple of points behind the teams that have been dominating everybody. My only worry there is it further incentivizes the most cupcake out of conference schedule possible, and then we lose any out of conference, like USC Notre Dame, because you're not only wanting to win games now, you're wanting to win games in regulation, and you can only really be assured of winning games in regulation if you're playing, the Missouri States of the world and blowing them out by, before halftime even happens. So before the ban, USC.
And so to conclude our show and conclude this discussion, I think you could do a very easy addendum to all of that. You get deducted half a point if you're playing a group of 5 team. You get deducted a full point if you play an FCS team. You can add some sweeteners and some sticks to all of that. So
that's really interesting because I think about the NDSU versus Colorado game a lot. So if you're Colorado and you lose that game in regulation, you get -1 point for the game?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Right?
Okay.
You play a paycheck game. You play a paycheck game and you lose it. Yes, you get negative points. Why not? Why not? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
See, this is why we had to have this conversation. And again, we didn't plan on it. Like a week ago, we weren't thinking about it. Sunday, we weren't thinking about it. But the All-Star game happens Tuesday night. We had to have this conversation. So we did run long, and we hope you enjoyed it. Our show clocking in almost at 90 minutes. I guess I should just say, when we get into football season, folks, when we get into the nitty-gritty and we're having USC games each week, we're going to try and revive what I did with Tim Prangley, where, we guarantee you 1 hour, and we'll stay on for 2 or 3 hours, but that would need to happen with super chats, with fundraising. You always get an hour, but we will be, during the season, we will be going super long, extra long, if we get super chats rolling in the door. So we're going to be doing that. We're not doing it in the off season, but once the season gets going, we will be doing USC review shows with that super chat structure that we had with Tim Prangley. So, folks, thanks for watching and listening here at the Voice of College Football. Like, subscribe, share, get the notification reminder. So next week, Big Ten Media Days, Tuesday the 22nd through Thursday the 24th. So we're here on Thursdays. So Big Ten Media Days are going to be fresh. So it's going to be wall-to-wall Big Ten Media Days, what we saw on Big Ten Network, what we observed, other stories from other reporters, USC and otherwise. So next week's agenda is pretty much set in stone. It's going to be really interesting to see what people say and what people are talking about at Big Ten Media Days. So we'll see you next week. For Ethan Inman, I'm Matt Zemek. Thanks for supporting the USC channel here at the Voice of College Football. We'll see you next week. Enjoy your upcoming weekend and fight on.